Hello, and welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Boland, and I'm a congenital amputee of the right hand. In this show, I will interview other amputees and allow them to tell you their incredible life stories. I'll also feature family members of amputees and others who support the amputee community, all in an effort to discuss the challenges and triumphs of those living with limb loss. So stick around and listen to inspirational stories and find out why we say, we're not stumped. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm Mike Boland, and today I got Kayla Inman on the podcast. In 2017, as a 24-year-old, Kayla slid on ice while leaving her workplace, and this event changed her life. And we're going to get into that today with Kayla. But Kayla, we always start the We're Not Stumped podcast with an in your own words. And first of all, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. We always start the We're Not Stumped podcast with a segment called In Your Own Words. So I'd like to hear the Kayla Inman story.
Yeah, so a little over 6 years ago, I had just gone to school. I got my bachelor's in applied biology, and I was working for a wastewater plant at the time. I ended up going to work that morning. I slipped on ice, and it kind of changed my life for the better. The next course of the year after I slipped on ice, I had a bunch of pain in my foot, and nobody kind of knew what was going on. And we tried all sorts of different remedies, and we did a lot of imaging, and the doctors were a little stumped. And then I moved to Colorado. About a year after after I slipped on the ice, when I moved to Colorado, I found a doctor who diagnosed me with a broken bone in my foot. So we did try and remedy some other things after figuring out what the cause of the pain was. And then I had my first foot surgery, and that was pretty hopeful after that surgery, that I'd get back to like moving and stuff, because prior to slipping on ice, I had ran half marathons and I was doing all sorts of extracurriculars, volleyball, tennis, skiing, whatnot. I got through that first healing process of that first foot surgery and just wasn't quite the same. I really struggled to heal. I struggled to heal my skin, my muscles, and everything just was real slow. And then a year after that surgery, I had a very similar sharp pain as when I had the broken bone. And so I went back in, and the doctor went, oh, well, the hardware failed and it broke the bone next to where you originally broke the bone. So we tried all sorts of things for a good year and a half, trying to heal this naturally and trying to get everything fixed. And it just got worse and worse and worse, to the point where I was constantly in a boot. And so we decided that surgery was the best route to go. We're going to take the hardware out. We're going to clean up the arthritis. We're going to make this all better now. And got done with that surgery, and the pain just never went away. I got to the 8-week post-op mark, and I knew from the first foot surgery that something wasn't right. My incision looked like I had just had surgery that morning, like it had not healed at all. My foot was still swollen and bruised looking. It was so painful. It felt like he had just done surgery that morning, even at the 8-week mark. And so for the next few weeks, we tried so many things to get that healing process going. We tried all sorts of natural remedies to see if that would help, a diet change and an exercise change. Tried staying in a boot a little longer. And then we went in for an exam at the 3-month mark post-op, and the doctor said, I think you have complex regional pain syndrome. And naturally, I was like, what the heck is that? Like,
I was going to ask that question.
It's bizarre. And he's like, it's a pretty rare nerve malfunction. And so I had to go to another doctor to get it confirmed. And so basically what it is your nerves had so much trauma, and this is from the bones breaking, the surgeries, the steroid shots, the physical therapy when I shouldn't have had physical therapy, and like all those
Wow.
traumas and the boot wearing, just everything down in my foot had just sent my nerves into overdrive. And so a light breeze going across my foot would feel like razor blades, and putting on a sock felt like it was being crushed, and just various other complications that just continued to get worse. And one of the things that they tell you when you first get diagnosed is that you need to attack it hard right away. And I called my sister to confirm this because she is a doctor, and I was like, "Hey, you're smarter than me. Let's talk about it." And her words were, "You're effed." So I was like, "That's encouraging. That's super encouraging." So I started going through all these procedures to try and stop the pain, because that was the big thing. Was it was just so excruciating. I started with a spinal cord nerve block.
Wow.
And so they had to go in with an injection in the base of my spinal cord to try and stop the nerves that ran down my leg from overfiring. And unfortunately, that doctor didn't know what he was doing. And I lost the functionality of my entire right leg for 6 weeks. And I developed a lot of medical PTSD from that.
Sure.
So I had to unfortunately go find another doctor, and I had to be moved to another facility and try all these other things, because once you have that diagnosis, it's a diagnosis that doctors are like, "I don't want to touch you, because I know if I touch you, it's going to make it worse."
Wow.
So I just kept getting bounced around from doctor to doctor. And I ended up in the Stedman Clinic in Vail, which is like one of the top places here in Colorado that can do procedures on patients with CRPS. And they tried everything. We did more spinal cord injections. We tried a spinal cord stimulator to try and eliminate the pain. It blocks the signals from my foot to the brain. And unfortunately, that made everything so much worse. And this is the course of like 8 or 9 months. Like I went from being able to walk to being on my deathbed. And it just dramatically decreased my quality of living.
Sure.
And we got to the point where after that spinal cord stimulator, the doctor looks at me and he goes, "I don't know how else to help you. There's a guy who does amputations, and there's a guy who does even more specialized stimulators." And I was like, if I go through another surgery, it better be my last one. So after that spinal cord surgery, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I was hallucinating, I was just dying. And I flew all the way out to Denver to meet the surgeon, and I was like, "Look, I have you, and then I have not a being here anymore."
Ooh.
And he looked at me and he looked at my foot, and he's like, "All right, I'm gonna give you some real facts here." He's like, "I've done this on a little over a dozen patients in similar situations, and most of them had success. This is a pretty like trial run kind of surgery, because you don't amputate for pain very often. You usually amputate because there's infections or there's just some other trauma."
Mm-hmm.
And based on the imaging, there wasn't trauma. But when you looked at my foot, I mean, the skin was thin and frail, and the blood vessels would just burst if you touched it. And the incision was still like scabbed over, even almost a year after that surgery. So it clearly looked bad. He's like, "I think we can do this. I think we can do it." And he's like, "I had a guy who, same thing, did an amputation, and 6 months later he ran a half marathon." I was like, "That's gonna be me." And then he goes, "And then I've had other people who are still on crutches, 2 years later." I'm like, "That can also be me, but I will take it."
Take that chance.
As long as I can just get up out of this bed and I can live my life. Because, at 24, you don't expect to have a incredible disability that is going to take everything from you.
Yeah.
So it was quite a wild journey to get to that point, because it had been so long. And by the time between the end of the spinal cord stimulator at the end of July, beginning of August, to when I had my amputation at the end of September, I had lost about 30 pounds just because I couldn't eat.
Wow.
So in the course of like 6 weeks, I had started, and thankfully I had that amount of weight to lose because I had gained about 80 pounds during the whole bed rest and whatnot.
Sure.
But when I got there, I was like, if this doesn't work, I am not making it to Christmas. Like that was the thought that just went in my head all the way to Denver. It was just, if this doesn't work, I'm not going to make it. So I put every ounce of faith into there. I had my Reiki master give me a rock that's infused with energy. And I got into that prep room and I taped it to my hand. And I asked the doctor when he came in, I was like, can you take a picture of my amputated leg when we get done with all of this? And he's like, sure, why not? And I was like, I also have a rock, so that has to go with me. I don't care what happens. And he's like, whatever floats your boat. Like, we'll figure out how to make it work. And my dad was there at my side, and so that was really nice. And I went to surgery, and at that point I had slept in over a week, and the anesthesia hit me and I was out, and I was like, this is gonna be nice. And I woke up from that surgery and instantly cried because I had no pain.
Wow.
And it was the first time in almost 5 years that I didn't have pain. And that was something so incredibly powerful, of like going into that. And as I was laying there getting prepped for surgery, and I was just like, this is gonna work. I know it's gonna work. And then I closed my eyes and I woke up and I didn't have pain. I was like, holy buckets, like that. That was incredible.
Hey, you can say whatever you'd like. It's my podcast. I know what you meant there. And good.
Yeah. So it was just, I mean, it was so incredible. And the doctors and the nurses heard me and they came running in. I was like, I don't have any pain. This is so great. And they're just like, oh, great. I'm glad you're okay. So I had such an incredible team of people that were there between my surgeon and the pain management team at the hospital. I mean, they were around the clock just making sure that I stayed comfortable. And then at day 3 was kind of my life-changing mindset, I guess. I woke up on day 3 and I was like, I'm not laying in this bed anymore. I'm gonna move.
Good.
So the entirety of day 3 was trying to convince the doctors to get rid of the nerve blocks in my spine and trying to get rid of all the pain management team so I could just get up and move. And so so that was kind of the beginning of the last 18 months was right there on day 3. Was like, I'm gonna do this. I don't have pain. We're going hard and going long. So, and
that was the first day of the rest of your life, I take it. Is that kind of one of those statements?
Yeah. It was so eye-opening. To the first 2 days was like, I just need sleep. I just was so tired. And then day 3, I woke up with this like energy and this attitude of like, you know what? This is a great thing. We're going to make the best of this. And I was like, that's it. That's what we're doing.
Well, I'll tell you what, with your attitude, and we're going to get into a lot of things you've accomplished since that day 3. One thing I did want to ask, though, do you know the bone that you had originally broken, the name of it, in case anyone's listening and are just curious?
That's a great question. I know it's one of the metatarsals.
Okay.
It's the one that's typically in a Lindsfrack fracture.
Okay, that's fine. I was just curious if you knew. And then as I was reading your story, you were in what you had said, level of 10 in pain for quite a bit of time. And I know you're on some medication, and I wasn't even aware of some of the blockers they tried to do on you. So that's one of the things that I think is an interesting story from your perspective, being able to make a decision as major as an amputation. As I listened to you, it didn't sound like there was any hesitation. Was there any hesitation to do that?
No, I really, for whatever reason, from the time of my second surgery, even right before then, I was like, why don't I just amputate it? Like, it caused a bunch of pain. The hardware broke. It's obviously not going to great. So that thought was already in my head, which was a really weird thing because, going in before my second surgery and I looked at the doctor, was like, can we just cut it off? Like, it's been a problem for a couple of years now. Like, I just don't want to deal with it anymore. And he's like, hold on, let's not do that. And then a few months into all the failed spinal cord blocks I met with another foot surgeon who I was like, listen, like there's clearly nothing structurally wrong on the images. And he's like, yep. And I was like, is amputation even an option at this point? And he's like, I know one guy that might do it, but most people won't even consider it. And I was like, oh, okay. And then once that spinal cord stimulator failed, was like, I made the decision to go find the guy that he said might be able to do it. And I was like, we're doing this. I don't care.
And
because, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Please, if you had more,
no. I was just going to say, it was, like I said, it was either cut my leg off or I wasn't going to make it. So it was a pretty easy decision at that point.
Well, the next part of your journey, I would imagine, I'm not going to say it's immediate, but it probably would be what's to the right of you, which would be some of your prosthetics that you have. And I liked some of the designs are fantastic. How was that journey? And the reason why I bring it up is because as I've educated myself on this journey, a lot of people think, especially going in, I'm congenital, so I'm a little different. But when they have an amputation, they think it's like, well, one day I have my amputation, next day I'll get fitted, day 3 I'm on my prosthetics running around. And that's actually a long journey. So how was your journey to get a prosthetic?
Super long, in my opinion, but it's
Sure.
pretty average. So the first 6 weeks after surgery, there's no fitting of prosthetics. You just heal your limb because there's so much trauma. I mean, it's a major surgery,
Sure.
even though it only took 90 minutes. Like, cutting off a leg is huge to your body to readjust and do that. So those first 6 weeks was more of a mental healing process.
Sure.
Prepping myself and, this might not work because I still had some residual post-surgical pain and stuff. Sure. So that was something to work through. But then once I was able to get fitted into my first prosthetic, there was no stopping me. That's what I got my first socket, and my sister actually painted a shark on there for me. So that way I could feel a little bit better, because that very first day she and I hopped into the car, we drove to Target, and I hopped out with my walker and my prosthetic, and I walked around there for, oh man, I think I walked probably 1.5 miles in my leg, and I was just smiling ear to ear, and she's like, you're crazy. And I was like, you know what? This is what I want to do.
Sure.
So that first, like, I don't know, 1.5 months that I had my leg, I really struggled because of all the previous pain. So my brain wouldn't allow me to take a full step on my limb.
Oh yeah.
And it was, I mean, just shocking how much your brain remembers that pain. I would try and I'd try to do it, and my leg would just buckle and say, nope, we're not putting any weight on it. And I couldn't convince my brain for so long. And happened to be at Thanksgiving at my parents' house, and I stepped, and for whatever reason my brain didn't even think, and I had a really sharp pain, so I didn't walk on it the rest of the day. I was like, this is bad. I just ruined everything. And very next morning I woke up and I had 0 pain, and I was walking around without crutches, and I walked through the Denver airport without crutches the following day. I was like, this is amazing. So it just took like one instance of like not thinking about it and being like, oh, it's actually not that bad. So, and then at 14 weeks post-op, I took my leg and I went skiing. So
very nice.
Yeah.
You've done quite a bit. One thing I do want to ask, though, since you were kind of talking about how powerful the brain is, do you suffer from phantom limb pain now?
I don't. I'm very thankful that I don't.
Sure.
I did, with the complex regional pain syndrome, there's a lot of things that you have to do to desensitize your nerves, to try and calm them down. And so I knew a lot of those desensitization techniques. And the second I woke up, I was doing them. And I said, we're going to make sure that what phantom pain I had goes away. And that part of why I asked the doctor to take a picture is I read an obscure blog post on the internet written, I don't know, a dozen years ago that said that they got to see their amputated leg, and that made their brain recognize that they don't have a foot, and so they never had phantom pain. I was like, I don't want to see it. I want a picture so when I'm ready, I can look at it. um Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with and learning. Most of what I learned about nerves is comes from the CRPS. But your nerves store memories, and they store those memories of the traumas. They store the memories of all the sensations. That's how you know, like when a bee lands on you, you know exactly what that is, and you can say, "Oh, I had that happen before. I know that's a bug on my arm." Like, oh man. So your nerves store memories, and so being able to understand that phantom limb pain or sensations is a memory that your brain is trying to connect the end of your residual limb to your brain again, and it's saying, oh, there was a foot there, let me try and tell you that there's something wrong with the foot, and it's like, oh, actually there's not a foot there. So
well, thank you for passing that along. That's I had never heard that. That's interesting information. I really appreciate you passing that along. But when I get back to your journey, one of the things that I remember reading about you was looking at what kind of, for lack of a better term, support groups are out there where you're at, and you didn't find anything. Now you have founded a support group where you're at, and obviously that's a journey in itself. I'd like to hear that story and how you were able to create the support group that you now run.
Absolutely. So I was 2 months post-op from my amputation, and I was really struggling because I had so many friends and family that had told me my decision to cut my leg off was not going to be good. They had told me that it was going to be bad, that things are going to happen. These are all the complications. And I was like, listen, I just need you to tell me that my choice is correct. And I need you to support me. I just need your support right now because I can't do this alone. Yeah. And it really felt like I was alone for a long time. And my ex-husband at the time was super unsupportive. And so 2 months post-op, I was looking at my sister who had come and moved in with me, and I looked at her, I was like, I think I need more help. Like, I know she was supportive and she was great, but she's one person and she doesn't fully understand like what losing a leg was.
Sure.
And so a month out, I was looking at all these groups, and I found that the Amputee Coalition does an online one, and I was like, that's great and all, but I'd love to see somebody in person. Yeah. So I shot my local newspaper. I was like, I'm starting this group. I just wanted you to maybe put a classified ad in that says there's an amputee support group starting on this date. And I showed up, and there was 3 people who showed up the first day, and I was like, holy man, this is great.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So, and those people are, a year and a half later, we're still going strong. I have guest speakers coming now, and it's so encouraging when I get done with these meetings and there's people that are like, I really needed this. And I was like, I know I started it for a selfish reason, but seeing that I wasn't the only one who needed support and that I could, give back to the community that was so supportive to me was great.
So it's still going on, you're saying, correct?
Yeah.
How do people in your area find out more about your support group?
So I do a Facebook group.
Okay.
I do a lot of stuff through the Facebook group just because I am very active on social media, and it's easier for me to do that. I also have an email group too, if Great. People don't do email, and I also do a text chain if people don't do email or Facebook. So I try and reach out to as many people as possible. I'll advertise when we have our group meetings. I reach out to the local hospitals and remind them that I still exist and we still have support groups. And yeah, so yeah.
That's great. And what we'll do is we'll make sure that all the links that where you're at on Facebook, and I know you're on Instagram, you're quite a bit, you're out there quite a bit, and we'll make sure all those links are out there. So if people do want to get a hold of you, they'll be able to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Hey, thank you for doing it. It's so important. That's one of the things, even locally, I want to give a shout out to a local one here in Mesa, Arizona. It's called Lively Limbs that Lisa puts on. And it is fun. It's interesting to hear other people's stories. We're all on our own journey, and there's no judging. It is what it is, but it is very important, and it's very positive for people to be able to attend those support groups. So congratulations to you on putting it together, and certainly a big thank you to you for doing that. Another thing that you've done is a TEDx speech. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about that because I thought it was fantastic. We'll certainly have a link to that in the description as well. But talk about that. Talk about that journey.
Yeah, I had just started that support group and I was really picking a momentum. And I had met a couple people that were like, you have done some inspiring things in the last few months. And I was like, you know what? I heard a quote that said, my survival or my story will become someone's survival guide. And so I was like, what better platform than to share it through a TED Talk? Yeah. And I had applied at the end of January and I was like, you know what? That's a big venue. Like that's something that people dream about. And then it takes several times to get in. And a couple months later, they emailed me and they're like, we picked you. And I was like, wait, what?
That's great. That is great.
Was a little unprepared for that email because I was expecting like a thanks, maybe next year.
Yeah.
That's, because they only pick a handful of people. They only pick a dozen speakers for each of these events. And and to be so honored to be chosen for that was just, I'm still speechless. I still can't believe that I got up on that stage and did that. But yeah, I wanted to share my story because I wanted to make sure that people understood that, even if you go through the worst of times, there's still better times on the other end. Like you can still overcome it all.
Yeah, and it really comes through on your speech. So fantastic. And like I said, there'll be a link to that. But you've done other things too. And even we have a little pre-conversation before we actually start recording this. And one of the things I learned about you is your weightlifting. And I know that in your running now, you're very active. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about that and have everyone else hear that story that I heard a few minutes ago, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah. I was pretty motivated. So for almost 5 years, I couldn't do a lot. I could walk at best, but not very far. And so once I had my prosthetic leg, I was bound and determined to just do all of the things all of the time. And thankfully, right before my amputation, I had met Kyle, who was working at my physical therapy office at the time. And he's like, I'm going to quit this job and I'm going to go start coaching full time for weightlifting. Like if you ever want to strength train, like come with me. And I was like, cool, great, I'll be there. And I got my leg, and the very next day I was in the gym with him. And the first month and a half, I learned how to sit slowly and stand slowly. So it was a very humbling process. But as soon as I was able to fully use my prosthetic and not have to use crutches and canes and other assistive devices, I was able to move and get stronger faster. And it was so fun to watch him grow as a coach too, because he had never coached a para athlete. And so we learned together and we grew together. And a few months into the journey, he's like, I think you should try Olympic weightlifting. And I was like, that's silly. I've never weightlifted ever in my life. And started hitting some of those bigger weights, and I deadlifted 255 pounds actually a year ago last week. And I was like, I think I can do this. I think so. You've hyped me up enough. Let's do it. So I competed in the Colorado State Championships in October of last year, and it was really, really exciting to pick up a new sport that I had never done, and to be able to compete and show that, we can still do anything that able-bodied people can do.
Sure.
Just might have to do it differently.
Sure. But you were talking about too, towards the end, and how, if I'm saying this correctly, the crowd really came around and it was watching you do some of the things. And that is, to lead by example is a very important thing. What was that like, having people crowd around and watch you deadlift?
Oh man, it was so exciting. So the first couple lifts of the event, I had my cheering squad from Grand Junction here that came over that they were competing too, and so it was nice like having that family of camaraderie that we already had built. And by the time I had done my sixth lift of the day, the whole crowd was cheering me on, and to hear that, even though it was, lifting marshmallows compared to these impressive human beings, I felt so powerful in the moment. I even actually hit my best personal record at the competition because I was so hyped up from all these people. I was like, this is amazing. Like, I've never had so many people cheering me on that had no idea who I was too. And I was just like, this is great. I love this.
Well, you deserve it. I mean, that's a great story. And I know if I'm not mistaken, I've seen pictures of you on your Instagram lifting weights. Is there some from the actual event on there as well?
Yeah, I
Excellent.
think there's a video on there, if not. So
Oh, I might steal it and try to put it on this video if you don't mind. So,
I don't.
a question for you: what is something that you'd like people to understand about life as an amputee? Is there anything now that you've gone around 18 months at least, if I'm not mistaken, maybe even more,
Yeah.
walking around as you do now? What's something you'd like people to understand?
I think the biggest thing is that people need to understand that every day is difficult to get up. Um, there are days that are very humbling, to be reminded that I had to pay to walk again. I had to pay to run. I had to wait a month just to get my running blade, which, any able-bodied person could just get up, throw on
Yeah.
some running shoes and go out the door.
Yeah.
When I had to wait. And that's one thing that people don't tell you a lot about when you're an amputee is how much people take movement for granted.
Yeah.
So
That's very, very good point. Me being a congenital upper limb, that's something I probably take for granted myself. So a very, very good point. What did you learn about your own journey though? Like, what did you learn about yourself going through this journey?
oh man, I have learned so much. One of the things that I've really learned about myself is that I thrive in change, constant change. And anything that I put my mind to, I can accomplish. Since my amputation, I changed careers, I got divorced, I moved, I have done so many things that I didn't think I could do on my own, which was really great and eye-opening for me of like, hey, you know what? I'm doing great. I'm doing just fine. I can do this on my own. Even as a disabled person, I, am able to still do this.
I interviewed a couple of the people that it sounds very familiar, Dr. Kimberly Emanuel and Waffle Lavelle. And again, being a congenital, I didn't have to go through some of those things, but their story of the other side and the happiness that is possible, I think and I hear that in your voice, it's always such a positive thing. It doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. And you had quite a journey and you founded a support group that is helping other people, but it is possible to be happy on the other end of the amputation. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And it's really all about your mindset. And that's one thing that if I could go back 5-6 years ago when I first broke my foot is, all those days where I was upset and frustrated that I couldn't move and I couldn't do these things. It's really all about your mindset because there are days, I mean, heck, I've had to sit in my wheelchair a couple times since I had my amputation just because I had either a bad pain day or I had some sort of mental blockage that I couldn't put my leg on. And so it's like, hey, you know what? We're going to try again tomorrow. And that's really, really what it's all about is just, you know what? Today didn't work out so great, but we still have tomorrow.
And some of the things, I'm sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was going to say, and tomorrow's not promised. And so we can try again tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to get at. Some of the people that I have the pleasure and honor to interview, we're all human at the end of the day, and we have our days and down days just like anyone else. And I think that's part of the journey. And if there's nothing else I'd like people to understand is you're okay if you're having a down day. It's perfectly normal. But there are other days that you talk about with yourself that are those up days that are unbelievably higher than you ever thought possible, especially when you talk about your weightlifting. I think that's a fantastic story.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so prior to my amputation, I had no idea what tears of joy actually meant. I always thought that was just a phrase that people said. And then I actually experienced it. Like the very first month out, I got a letter from my prosthetist that's like, I'm going to rate you as a K3 to start with. And I was just like blown away, because being rated at a K3 out of 4 meant that I was able to get a really cool foot right away, which is really great because it allowed me to do more things. But that meant that somebody had faith in me that I was going to move and run again. And I sobbed. I videotaped myself because I was just like, I don't even know what this means. Like tears of joy. That's crazy. And I've cried so many times, tears of joy. I've cried more tears of joy than tears of sadness in the last 18 months. And it's just insanity to me.
That's a great story. I like your designs too on your prosthetics that you have there. And that you talked about that a little earlier. Like, hey, yeah. let's show them off here.
Yeah. So my very first one, my sister who was living with me at the time, I had gone out and, they're flesh colored and they're just boring and they're meant to be boring. And I was like, I want something fun. I need something exciting. And she painted me on a shark. So that way when I wore my prosthetic, people had something to look at. And then we transferred into our tie-dye cheetah print, which was really great for a long time. And then I have my newest leg, which is, looks very plain, but I got it so people could doodle on it. There's a few doodles on here somewhere, but I thought that would be more fun and interactive for people to be involved in the prosthetic process. And then my running blade, I got very bright, shiny, colorful cheetah print as well. So,
love it.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So what's next for you? What's the future look like? What are you hoping to do? Short term, long term?
That's something that I have no idea. I keep waking up every day and being thankful that I'm still here. Yeah. I surpassed my expiration date, and every day that I have gone past my expiration date, I am just thankful to be here. I know I want to continue helping people and giving back to the amputee community because they've been so supportive everywhere I've gone. There's no gatekeeping and information on how one person's journey helped them and whatnot, which I find really inspiring. Because a lot of other journeys, people are like, well, this is the only way to do it and you shouldn't do it any other way. And it's like, well, it may not have worked for you, but it worked for someone else. So
sure.
There's a lot of information sharing in there, and I think I just really want to help more people.
Well, it's great. And you helped so many just by being on my podcast. And I thank you for that. And certainly your TEDx and your support group. And I see nothing but more positive things ahead for you. I've taken a lot of your time, and I just want to thank you so much for taking a few minutes of your time to be on the We're Not Stumped podcast. So thank you, Kayla. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike, for having me. I appreciate it.
Stumped podcast, hosted by Mike Boland. If you want to be a guest on the program, reach out to Mike at his email address, mike@mikeboland.com. This podcast is produced by One Hand Man Productions. If you are looking to start your podcast, go to onehandmanproductions.com.